Grab a cocktail with us and welcome to the hot mess that is my life as a single makeup artist living in a college town in Florida. This is Kara's Lipstick Diary.
We're back, you guys. Have you hit that subscribe button yet? You know that little button down there that says subscribe? You need to click on it. And make sure you follow us on social media, Instagram, Facebook. You'll get to see all the behind the scenes things and, listen to me spout off about whatever my opinions are in some sort of subject. It's kind of fun though. You should go like everything, subscribe things, leave us feedback. We want to know what you're thinking. All right, so it is cocktail time. This one I kind of really love because it's a gin that does some really fun things. But first off, we have lemonade. We're gonna do a half a cup of lemonade. All right, pouring it in, trying not to spill it everywhere. We're putting that on top of the ice already in the glass. And then we're going to go to some violet liqueur and we're just gonna do a half ounce of that. I really just bought this because who doesn't want violet liqueur? I mean, that sounds bougie as hell, y'all. Let's put that in our drink. So we're gonna do a half ounce of that. I have no idea if this is actually a half ounce because I don't understand the measuring on this little thingamajigger. I think they call this thing a jigger. I don't know, it's a weird thing, but it's terribly labeled. I have no idea what it's trying to tell me to do. All right, now we're gonna do 2 ounces of the Empress gin. And this is my favorite gin, you guys, because it does magic tricks. It starts out purple, and then when it hits the citrus or the acidicness of the citrus, it changes colors. Literally, this is the coolest gin in the entire world. I'm kind of obsessed with it. All right, so then apparently, according to Cam, I'm supposed to pour this on the side and it will layer. Okay, I'm really just spilling this everywhere. I'm really bad at this. There was 1 and now we're gonna do 2. Oh God, I'm so bad. I'm making such a mess. This is why when Cam came on set, it was a great idea for him to help make the drinks because I'm a disaster. Okay, that's kind of layered, not really layered, but whatever, I'm not as cool as he is. And then we're gonna go to the club soda, and we're gonna do 1/4 of a cup of the club soda, just sort of to top it off. He gets mad at me because I require exact measurements, and apparently that's not required in cocktail making, but in my world, it's very much required. And now that the drink is a lovely shade of lavender, we're gonna add some lavender edible glitter because I can't do a drink without that. We're gonna add that in. We're gonna put some lovely lemons in there to make it look pretty because who doesn't want their drink to be pretty? And we're good to go. Today's episode, we're gonna talk about mental health and the importance of things like therapy, the different types of therapy out there that might work for you, because you all know how much therapy and mental health is important to me. I bring it up all the time. So I'm super excited to have my guest on today to talk about this subject. All right, you guys, you ready to talk?
All right, you guys. So I am very excited to have my guest here, Eric. He has agreed to come on and talk about the importance of mental health. He is a therapist here in town. My therapist was like, girl, HIPAA, I can't go on, even though I introduce her as my therapist all the time. So Eric agreed to come on. He is a friend of mine that I know through networking groups. And we're going to talk about the importance of therapy and the different types of therapy and why it's more than just paying someone to bitch to, because therapy is way more than that. And I know there's a huge stigma around therapy. So I want to destroy that stigma. I hate that stigma. I bring up therapy all the time. It is something that has definitely helped me throughout the years, and especially the past couple of years. So thank you, Eric, for coming on and addressing all of this and talking about it. I am so happy to have you here and talk about it because to me, therapy has changed my life. It has been amazing. And I want other people not to be scared of therapy because it shouldn't be something scary or something with a stigma attached to it because it's kind of important.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you for having me on. I think you're doing a lot of great stuff with this show.
Thank you.
It sounds like you've been dealing with this topic a lot.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important for people to hear.
Well, and the thing is, I don't understand why there's a stigma around mental health and therapy. I mean, we go to the doctor if we break a bone. We go to the doctor if we have sore throat, but every single one of us has dealt with trauma in our life. Every single one of us has hang-ups mentally that we should be getting help for, but yet we don't. And there is this huge stigma. Why do you think that is? As a therapist, is this something, obviously, you have to deal with patients coming in with that?
I think it's complicated. I think it has overlaps with a lot of other areas of life that we have kind of moral values attached to and things like that. So, a broken bone is pretty morally, ethically neutral.
Right. Very neutral.
Not a lot of, values attached to broken bones or to bone strength in general or anything like that. But oftentimes, I think mental health issues overlap with like parenting, religious interpretations of these things,
Societal constructs.
societal constructs, class systems and things like that. And people have been cultures have been interpreting and trying to deal with this sort of stuff and deciding what to make of it all since the very beginning. And that dealing with it as kind of a medical issue or as something that you would, see a therapist about.
Well, and a couple of points. One, mental issues can lead to physical things.
Yeah.
Which I think a lot of people aren't aware of. I've been in and out of therapy my whole life, and it took me until this past year to realize how many of my physical issues were actually tied to traumas I had, mental traumas. And until I dealt with those in therapy with EMDR and other things that I was able to all of a sudden those health things just went away. Holy shit. And I don't think people think about that. I don't think people realize how much the body holds on to that trauma.
Absolutely. In fact, there's a great book if and I think you know what I'm talking about.
I know the book.
The Body Keeps the Score.
Great book, you guys. You need it.
And it's great for clinicians to read, therapists. It's great for anybody who's interested in this kind of stuff to read. Bessel van der Kolk, I think his name is. And
my therapist gave it to me and was like, girl, you need to read this. And I started reading it on a plane and I was like, oh my God. Oh my God. Because I had all these things. I'd been in and out of doctor's appointments, had every test run, nothing. Everything was like, no, you're fine. No, you're fine. And I was like, bullshit. No, I'm not fine. Like, my body is doing these bizarre things and I have no control over it. What the hell is happening? And I realized personally that I had been in fight or flight mode for pretty much adolescence until adulthood. Yeah. And the minute I started addressing that through therapy, all those physical things started just going away. Amazingly just going away. It was phenomenal. And for me, it was EMDR therapy, which you do EMDR. Can you explain to that? Because to me, it's some weird hocus pocus. I really, honest to God, don't have a clue what is happening, but it's amazing. So can you explain EMDR?
Yeah, I'll do my best. So it looks like hypnosis a little bit. Yeah.
It's hocus pocus.
Yeah, it does look like it. You are sitting there with a therapist in the bilateral stimulation portion of it. Depending on how they do it, there are different ways, but you might have somebody holding their fingers out in front of your eyes and you follow with just your eyes, and then they'll stop and ask you, what did you notice? And then you keep going. And the idea with this is that it puts you in a state of like dual attention is what they call it. So normally, if you were to think about the most traumatizing thing that ever happened to you when you were a child, then you might go into fight or flight mode. If you have like full-blown PTSD with this, you might go into a flashback, but you would certainly start to experience many of the same emotions, a lot of the same body sensations, the clenching, the numbness, maybe, dissociation can happen, and sometimes even re-experiencing of things, memories, all the sensory stuff can come back. And there's no room to really process that because it has not been processed as part of your life. Like, you could probably think about embarrassing things that have happened to you, maybe even really distressing, painful things that have happened to you in the past. But right now, they're great stories. You tell them, you laugh.
Right.
Yeah. And at the time, you were utterly miserable.
Well, and I don't know I assume I'm not the only one who goes through this. I will reflect on situations that occurred when I was a child and be like, oh, it was no big deal. Mm-hmm. And then my therapist said to me, but all those little kids that you consider yourself to be like a faux aunt to, if it happened to one of them, how traumatic would that situation be? And I'm like, yo, bitch, if anyone ever did that to one of those kids, I'd kill them. And I was like, wait a second. Why, when it happened to me, did I think, oh, that wasn't a big deal? But it happened to one of my friend's kids. And I go into mama bear mode. it made me realize that those moments were actually traumatic to me as a child. And I had no idea. And I had been holding on to all of that trauma for 40 years and didn't even recognize it as trauma.
Yeah, in retrospect, we can often see it, those kinds of things as sort of, normal stuff. And I, sometimes talk to people who, because they grew up with money or something like that, they feel like, my childhood was great. It was fine. So many people have it worse.
Right.
And yet
that was my mentality.
Yeah,
other people had it worse.
Yeah, yeah. And then, talk about some of the things that happened to them. And it's like, that is traumatizing.
Right.
There. So,
it was when my therapist's eyes sort of like bugged out that I went, oh, wait, maybe that was traumatic.
but with EMDR, so the dual attention.
Yeah.
Puts you, the aim is to put you in a state where part of your attention is on doing this weird thing with your eyes, and it kind of puts you in your senses a little bit. It divides your attention. And so that makes some space to not fully go into the memory, fully into the fight or flight or any kind of trauma response, and to make some space to process that stuff. And so with EMDR, you often will have a kind of positive belief that you're trying to integrate, and it can make some space for that to get in and reorganize things. Because it doesn't matter how strongly you know that you are a good person, that you are worthy of love, things like that.
Doesn't mean you always internalize that.
Yeah, these things, because they have not been fully processed, these experiences, these beliefs about yourself, these emotions, they are locked off from influence by the things that you know to be true.
Yeah.
And so this makes some space for that to get in and reorganize some things.
Well, and I think the reason EMDR worked really well for me is I'd already done about 2 years of talk therapy with my therapist. We had delved into all sorts of aspects of my life and understanding why more recent trauma had occurred. And when we started doing the EMDR, instead of focusing on the recent trauma that I thought was my core problem, why I was having PTSD, why I was having anxiety, we went back to a lot of that early stuff. And that's what we haven't even hit the recent stuff yet. I've been doing EMDR for 6 months now. And it was hitting that early stuff, and literally almost immediately, by going to that early trauma that sort of is the reason the later trauma occurred, I immediately started seeing shifts in every aspect of my life. I was able to set boundaries. I was never able to do that before. I was able to improve my communication skills. I was able to improve my self-esteem. My physical or my massage therapist was like, "Girl, what are you doing? Like, your muscles have changed." Immediately shift in that. Immediately a shift in digestive issues I had had. Oddly, my sexual encounters completely changed as well. Like, I was able to actually have good sex for the first time in really my life. I thought I'd had good sex before. Apparently I was wrong. But it was all it was fascinating to me that we dealt with things that didn't have to do with sexual trauma, did not have to do with my rapes, did not have to do with any of that, but it still helped me in those areas. Because EMDR so just sort of changed my wiring. I know that sounds weird, but it does.
Oh,
that's what it does.
That's what they often use to describe it, as changing, rewiring the brain in a way.
And I found it interesting because every time I've had an EMDR session, it has been a totally different experience. The first time I did it, I felt like I was high as a kite trying to leave. I was like, y'all, I don't know how I'm going to drive home. This is fascinating. The one I had this week was fascinating. It was, I literally felt, first my muscles tensed up. I went into that fight or flight muscle tension. Then I started getting this flushed sensation that I used to get when I was a teenager and embarrassed by something. And it was fascinating. And as the session went on, it started easing. But then throughout the night, after I had left therapy, it would still come back. And my therapist kept checking on me to make sure, how are you doing? Are you having weird symptoms? But it's literally just fascinating to see how the body responds to EMDR. It's not like anything I've ever done before.
Yeah, it can be very different. It's because you are facing some of the toughest stuff that has ever happened in your life, facing it directly, which can sound terrifying and on some level is, right? And, but facing it in a different way.
Yeah.
And I think even just the fact of going into this stuff and staying with it.
Yes.
Which normally, you know, fight or flight, you either distance yourself
Yeah.
from it, you shut down, you run away.
You bury it way deep inside.
Yeah. But just being able to stay with it
Yeah.
and be okay, I think is a, you know, small piece of what makes a difference too. You know?
Well, and I think therapy in general, that's what it is.
Yeah.
You know, there were so many things that had happened to me in my life, and I thought, well, you know, that's just shit that happened. Like, it's not a big deal. Like, I acknowledge that these things happen. I acknowledge that, 13, I had a male family member pin me to a wall and ask me to model thong underwear and graphically describe what he wanted to do to me. Like, whatever, no big deal. This happens to girls. Like, literally, like, that's what I just sort of thought and buried it down. And it wasn't until I started going to therapy that I was able, I described to my therapist the other day, I was like, I had all the puzzle pieces. I knew everything that happened to me, but I didn't know how they all connected. Yeah. And I didn't understand how those connections led to my reactions now, how I interacted with people, how I judged other people, until I started going to therapy and talking through it with a trained professional, not just a friend, not just a family member, but a trained professional who could hand it to me and be like, let's connect the pieces. Let's make all of this make sense. And I think that that's something that people don't realize therapy is.
Yeah, and therapy can be a lot of things. You know, some people, we'll talk about doing some of the kind of deeper trauma-based work, or
Right.
some of the, I like to do a lot of parts work type stuff. And some people really do just want a place to be able to go in and talk about stuff because maybe everybody in their life is too invested in their choices and things like that. And so I just want to come in and complain to somebody who's not going to tell me what to do, right? And some people just want that. Some people just need that. But yeah, really understanding the connections between things, being able to, so for instance, on a very sort of microcosm level, one of the things that I will, help people with, like, let's say anxiety or something like that, is to just tell themselves the story of why they're feeling the way they are. So I'm feeling anxious. I might say to myself, okay, I am feeling anxious because I am embarrassed, and I'm angry at myself because I thought of something that I said to somebody the other day that I really regretted. And so now I am, kind of beating myself up over that. And I wish I had not said that. And, and I decide whether or not I want to apologize to that person. And just creating a context for it, creating an understanding of just even that moment oftentimes makes a difference there. And then you do something like that through a variety of different things with your, the biggest things in your life, the things that are troubling you the most, I think.
Well, and I know, like, I've been pushed into therapy by the time I was in middle school. Mm-hmm. And I think at that point, I wasn't able to process anything. I would go in and talk about movies because that's what was top of mind for me. I was I wanted to be Spielberg. So I would go in and talk about movies. And I wouldn't really talk about anything that was happening. I never delved into why I had eating disorders. Many of that was tied to sexual trauma. Many of it was tied to different things that was going on. It wasn't until I got older and I was able to really start putting those pieces together through therapy. I couldn't until I was in therapy. It took someone going, let's piece all this stuff together and let me give you the tools to piece this stuff together. Yeah. And I found that so helpful as an adult, looking back at these things and being like, oh, now I understand why I did that, why I reacted that way, why I continue to react that way. How do I fix that behavior? Because all of us have room to grow. None of us, anyone who tells me that they hope that in 10 years they're exactly the same person as they are now, really, I hope you've evolved. That's part of life. And I think therapy allows us to do that evolution with people who have been trained in how to do it.
Yeah, and like what you said about understanding, why these things are happening. Because I think it's not understanding your own emotions and not understanding why you do the things you do, why sometimes you make choices that are opposite to your desires and your beliefs. That's the stuff that makes people feel crazy.
Right.
Is when they don't understand that
Why
stuff.
am I doing this? Why do I keep attracting?
In retrospect and even beforehand, I would not have chosen to do this.
Right.
That is against my my values. That is against
Right.
what makes sense. And I'm embarrassed about it. And I knew I would be embarrassed if I did that. And I did it anyway. And I feel insane. Right.
Yes.
And some of the greatest relief I've seen, in sessions with people sometimes comes from something as simple as them explaining something to me, and we'll kind of go over, the context and,
Right.
when else they have felt that way, and going far back and thinking like, of course, I'll say like, of course you feel that way.
Right.
Of course it would have been really hard to do anything else at the moment.
Right, because
And
that's
they're
what
like,
you know how to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and
Yeah.
that was one of the things I couldn't figure out why I kept attracting very toxic people into my life, narcissistic qualities, very manipulative. And I was like, why are these the people that I keep letting into my world? Like, I don't understand. And then it was going back and looking at things and like piecing it all. And I was like, oh, well, this makes sense because that was my norm. Like, that's why I kept doing it. So, being able to see that has been absolutely like amazing and would never have happened if it wasn't for therapy. It opened my eyes to that. Yeah. So we've talked about EMDR. We've talked about a little bit about talk therapy. Mm-hmm. I know you also love group therapy. What is the difference between regular talk therapy, group therapy, EMDR, so that like if someone is watching, they know which one might fit their needs the best?
Well, if you think about, if you were to exclude from individual therapy any subject that had to do with your relationships with other human beings,
Right.
how much would be left to talk about?
Not much.
Yeah.
Yeah, not a whole lot.
And so in a way, when you're doing individual therapy, and I'm a big fan of individual therapy, I love doing it. I think it can be, life transformative. And, but when you're doing individual therapy, in a lot of ways, you're talking in here about what's happening out there.
Right.
I do like in individual therapy doing a lot of here and now stuff, working with what you're actually feeling in this moment, what I just said and what your response to that was and, why that was that way. But in group therapy, and I think, maybe there's a distinction to be made between things like, DBT groups where you're learning skills and things like that. I like to do interpersonal processing groups. In those, you don't come in with an agenda, you don't have a topic, you don't have lessons or anything like that. You come in and you talk about whatever's important to you. Especially that as it has to do with your, therapeutic goals and things like that. But in a group setting, you see the way that people are responding to you, and you have an understanding with everybody that you're going to be open and honest with what you're feeling, with your curiosity about other people. So, if, I don't know, for instance, if I came in and you were busy here, doing the introduction to the show or something like that, and I felt ignored a little bit or something like that, and I felt upset about that or something, and then you could sense that in me, and maybe you think, oh God, he doesn't want to be here or something like that, and did I do something weird in inviting him, or did something happen there, and that I'm seeing that in you, and I'm wondering like, oh, this is going terribly, and now I'm worried about the show, I'm going to be nervous and all this stuff, and maybe I did something, I don't know, all these things happen under the radar, and in group therapy, you're encouraged to talk about this stuff. And so you get to find out how you affect other people.
Almost instantaneous.
Yeah, you get to find out how you're affecting people. You get to ask them how you affected them. And so I could ask you like, okay, what I said, did that make you feel weird?
Right.
Do you think I'm crazy right now? And you could tell somebody, yeah, what you said made me feel kind of uncomfortable, know, and you can talk about that.
Well, and I think oftentimes when you have lived through trauma, you often feel isolated. Like you're the only one that has ever been sexually assaulted. You're the only one that has dealt with an eating disorder. You're the only one that has dealt with anxiety, depression, PTSD. You feel very alone. And I feel like maybe in group therapy, it kind of helps you realize like, you're not the only one. Yeah,
I think in all kinds of group therapy, that finding out that your experience is more shared than you know is a huge thing. Yeah.
Well, and I think one of the reasons I do the show is to talk about the shit and put it out there and let people know that they aren't alone. Because I, for years, thought I was very much alone in, whatever the issue was, whether it was sexual assault, whether it was fighting eating disorders, more recently being estranged from my family. once I sort of put that out there and I made it like known, it was amazing to see the community come along of other people going through similar things. And like people have reached out to me on the show and been like, so I have not been able to deal with the fact that I was raped. Because I listened to you, I'm going to go get help. And I think that that's one of the things when we keep the shit secret, we don't realize how many other people are going through the same thing.
Yeah.
And that we all need help. And I think group therapy is probably a way to sort of break down those walls to let people, you know, let people into your world, and in return, let them into, you know, let it be known that we both are going through this shit.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. To not feel alone, and to be able to try things out with other humans in a safe environment, not just trying things out with a therapist, trying things out with somebody who's going to have maybe the kinds of reactions you could expect from your friends and things like that. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that's huge. I mean, it almost sounds, it's funny. I was a theater major. So when you're talking about that, I'm like, oh, it sounds like acting class.
Yeah.
But you know, like, I think that is so key because we don't know how other people are going to react. We don't know how we're going to react to other people until we're in the moment, and getting that experience can be so insanely helpful.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So let's swing back. Stigma of therapy. How is that something that you as a therapist sort of fight to get through to your clients, to the people who you're working with, to help them get over that societal stigma of therapy is bad, therapy is stupid, therapy is not something that I need, you know, oh, I can just talk to my friends about this shit. How do you help clients realize that there's more to therapy than that?
Well, you know, I can usually find out pretty quickly what they're wanting from therapy, what they're expecting from therapy. Some people come in and they just know they want help and they don't know what it's going to look like. I feel like I've been seeing more people who are doing therapy for the first time in their lives lately.
Hey, we're living through a pandemic. Yeah, that might be why. Kind of brings out those mental health issues.
Yeah, so and I think you're right, and I think that's bringing a lot of people in for the first time.
Yeah,
and so yeah, oftentimes people will come in, you know, a little apprehensive about what this is going to be, what this is going to look like. A lot of people say, I don't really know how to do this, that kind of thing.
Well, I think there's that fear of like, what do I do? I'm just going to sit here and talk? Like, that's weird. You know, and I think that is something that is a little unnerving, is like, we're told that we're supposed to have conversations. We're supposed to listen and give back and all of that. And then you go to therapy and you're supposed to talk about yourself, which I think, you know, is something that as in society we're told not to do, you know, but yet that's what you do in therapy, and there's a reason for it.
Yeah. And I think that, you know, I'll often ask people, let's say that we do some great therapy together, or let's say that you've stumbled into the world's greatest therapist, you know, office or something like that. You know? What do you imagine your life looking like afterwards? And that can often be a good place to start, you know? And we can start talking about what it might take to get there, what stands in the way of getting there. You know, what would be scary about getting there? And, you know, because sometimes the things that people want, there's something in them that's terrified of having it. And so that can be something that can be a good place to start too. But also, you know, hearing that they are choosing what their goals are, and I can talk to them about, here are the different things we could do, here are the different ways we could go, and we can talk about those and what sounds good to you. You know, so, you know, I've talked about like EMDR, internal family systems, mindfulness, just, you know, coming in and talking about these things for a while. We can just come in and have conversations, you know, until you decide you want to do something different if you want, that sort of thing. I think, you know, knowing that they're in control of this process can be really helpful. But I think one thing that's important to acknowledge, by the time they're in my office, they have probably already overcome some level of distress about this.
Well, and I do have to say, you know, as someone who's been doing a lot of therapy myself recently in the past few years, really diving deep into therapy can be extremely painful. I know when I first started, it was probably the most painful time period actually in my life, dealing with those issues that I had not dealt with. I know I went from not being able to cry for myself. Like could not cry for myself, to like, I would have a conversation with a random person I met at Publix and I would just burst into tears for like no reason at all. It was overwhelming. Those emotions that were bubbling up for years felt like I was being hit by a tidal wave. But getting through that, processing that, getting to the other side of that has been so empowering, so amazing. Like really now feeling like, oh shit, this is who I'm supposed to be. My feelings are okay. My boundaries are okay. These things that I lived through, I have survived. I have processed them. I am on the other side of it is insane. And like I said at the beginning, it was the most painful thing probably ever to take all of that trauma and bring it up to the surface and face it square in the eye and be like, you don't own me, you don't control me, I'm taking you down. Yeah. It was fucking hard as shit, you guys. So like when we talk about this, I don't want people to think like, oh, going to therapy is going to be like, you know, roses and sunshine and everything's peachy keen. You're going to have to actually deal with some shit. But on the other side of that is kind of beyond amazing. So what you are doing with your clients, coming on the show talking, is really, I think, so helpful to us as a society. Because like if we don't deal with it, we're kind of fucked. We're passing on generational trauma just to pass it on because that's what we've done. But thank you so much for everything you are doing to help people. Like I say, therapy has saved my life, literally. Where I was a few years ago, we were very lucky that I'm still here because I might not be. And it's because of therapy that I'm on the other side. So thank you for everything that you do, Eric.
It's really beautiful and moving to hear, you know, your story and how much that has changed your life.
Yeah.
And thank you for being a part of this and for having me on.
Yeah. When you said you do it, I was like, oh, thank you, Eric. This is such an important subject to me because like I say, like, right. He's got a very purple drink over there. To me, this is so important. It's such an important topic. And too many people ignore it, push it away. It's a taboo. It's something we don't do. We don't talk about. But to me, it's very, very important. And I think it's something that we need to address as a society and make therapy and mental health a big part of our world. You know, we break a bone, we go to the doctor. We should do the same for our, you know, our mental health and our brains and all of that. So Eric, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, you guys. Thank you guys so much for watching this episode. I hope you got something from it. If you have questions or anything, please feel free to contact me through social media or on the YouTube channel. Thank you guys so much, and we will see you soon. Make sure you subscribe. Bye.